Welcome everyone to Things Around 8. Dear friends, in this video we will talk about the military capabilities of Iran and Israel, and I will answer a question that has been asked a lot in recent days. In the event of a conflict between these two countries, which one is stronger and better prepared? And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any news. When we talk about military comparisons between two or more nations, there is always the risk of everything turning into a big game of super trumps. For those who are not familiar with the game, it is a set of cards with individual characteristics that players use to face their opponent's cards. In its military aspect, there are specific variations of the game for ships, planes, armored vehicles, among many others, with players making a direct comparison between the characteristics of each card. The winner is the one with the card with the most positive characteristics. As a game, it is a fun way for people to learn about the characteristics of certain equipment, vehicles, aircraft, and vessels. But when applied to real life, especially in broader comparisons such as the military capabilities of countries, the result is completely useless and does not help to clarify anything at all. Therefore, in this video, we will begin by directly presenting the individual capabilities and numbers of each side, reserving for the end a more in-depth analysis of what these numbers really mean in the context of a potential conflict between Iran and Israel. In this sense, we will start with the military personnel, with Iran standing out by a large margin, with an armed forces composed of an estimated number of more than 600,000 combatants in active service and a reserve of almost 350,000 men. Israel, on the other hand, has more discrete numbers, with 170,000 combatants in active service. But in comparison, it has a much larger number of reservists, with almost 500,000 soldiers. Still on the ground side, but now in artillery, armored vehicles and combat vehicles, Iran stands out with an estimated number of 1,500 heavy combat armored vehicles. Most of these are Soviet vehicles, such as the T-72, and domestic variants, such as the T-72 Hakesh, a 2010 upgrade, and the T-72Z Safir from the 1990s. The rest of Iran's armored force is made up of vehicles such as the 1960s-era American M60, the 1950s-era M48 Patton, and older Soviet vehicles such as the T-62 and even the T-55. The most modern Iranian armored vehicle is the Kahar, unveiled in 2016. But although Iran claims it is already in service, only a handful of these vehicles have been seen at military parades, so it is not possible to determine how many are in action. In the combat vehicle category, Iran has an estimated fleet of around 1,300 vehicles, a mix of Soviet and American vehicles, almost all of them from the 1950s and 1980s. In the case of Israel, the numbers are much more discrete, with around 400 Merkava Mark IV armored vehicles in operation, reinforced by a few dozen Merkava Mark III armored vehicles, with hundreds of this model in storage. Despite the number being much smaller, these armored vehicles are much more modern than the Iranian ones, with almost all of them equipped with advanced defense systems such as the Trophy, which intercepts anti-tank missiles and grenades in flight. In the area of combat vehicles, Israel operates almost the same number as Iran, with around 1,300 vehicles. However, as with heavy armored vehicles, Israeli combat vehicles are also much more modern. The Namir is particularly noteworthy, still in the early stages of adoption but already used in large-scale combat, and the Eitan, both equipped with active defense systems, such as the Arden Fist. In the Air Force, Israel is ahead of Iran, both in terms of numbers and mainly in terms of technology, with the Israelis operating around 350 combat aircraft, a fleet composed mainly of fighters such as the F-15 and F-16, both in customized versions, with weapons and avionics developed by Israel. Not to mention, of course, the F-35, with the Israelis operating a customized version, also known as the Adir. The Iranians operate just over 300 combat aircraft, all of which are quite old, such as the F-14 Tomcat from the 1970s, the F-4 Phantom II from the 1960s, the F-5 version E from the 1970s, and several Soviet fighters such as the MiG-29. The most modern Iranian fighter is the Su-35, but it is believed that the country does not yet have any in full operation. At sea, Iran has many more vessels than Israel, but they are mostly small vessels, such as speedboats and patrol boats, which are very useful for surveillance and quick combat in the Gulf, but are inadequate for combat on the high seas. Iran also operates many more submarines than Israel, but like its surface fleet, Iranian submarines are very short-range and have much lower technology compared to the advanced Israeli submarines. In the area of anti-aircraft defense, Israel once again stands out with well-established systems such as the Iron Dome, for defense against artillery and low-caliber rockets, and the Arrow and David Sling, for longer-range defenses and against ballistic missiles. Iran, on the other hand, relies on much older Soviet systems, such as the S-200 and S-300, for long range, and the Thor, for short and medium range. But where Iran clearly stands out compared to Israel is in the area of ballistic and cruise missiles. There are, of course, no precise and official figures, but several sources report that Iran has in its arsenal an estimated 2,000 long-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israeli territory, in addition to thousands of long-range drones such as the Shahed-136, widely used by Russia against Ukraine. And now, with the figures already presented, let us move on to a comparative analysis based on the current context of the conflict. If Iran had a direct border with Israel, its numerical advantage in the areas of infantry and heavy armor would be an important differentiator. However, since Iran is more than 1,500 kilometers away, in the event of a direct conflict between these two countries, Iranian and Israeli infantry and armor would not face each other directly. This means that, for our analysis, what matters are the air missile capabilities and defenses of each country. In this regard, as I have demonstrated here, Israel stands out by a wide margin with its air force and air defense systems, with Iran standing out in quantitative terms in the area of ballistic missiles and drones. With all this in mind, we can conclude that if an open, declared and large-scale conflict breaks out between Iran and Israel, the Iranians will be able to cause great and terrible damage against generic targets in Israel, mainly cities, through massive missile and drone attacks, more or less as they did in April and October 2024, only multiplied by 10 or 20. But the Israelis, through stealthy and highly precise attacks, would be able to destroy Iran's most important strategic facilities, especially its military bases and mainly its advanced nuclear research centers. Let's not forget attacks against top members of the Iranian regime, an area that Israel has already shown that it dominates 100%. Therefore, at a strategic level, Israel would theoretically be capable of destroying all of Iran's main military programs, mainly its nuclear program, in addition to carrying out precise attacks, which would even be capable of promoting regime change in the country. But in return, massive Iranian missile and drone strikes would have the potential to cause many casualties and great devastation among the Israeli civilian population. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news.